Hello and welcome, my wonderful friends, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, dreamers and achievers. No matter where you are in the world or what time it is, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night to you all. How's everyone doing today? I hope you're full of energy and positivity. This is Hossein Babul, and I'm truly excited to be back again with another powerful and inspiring topic just for you. Today's topic is 07 Best Techniques to Reduce Anger, inspired by Jack Ma. I promise this video will add real value to your day, so don't skip a single moment. Stay with me from start to finish. And of course, hit that subscribe button and join our growing family, because your support inspires me to create even more amazing content for you. What if I told you that one of the world's most successful entrepreneurs, Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, credits his ability to control anger as one of the key factors behind his billion-dollar empire? Today, we're diving deep into 7 life-changing techniques that can transform how you handle anger, frustration, and conflict in your daily life. These aren't just random tips, they're battle-tested strategies inspired by one of the most resilient business leaders of our time. But here's the thing, anger isn't always bad. It's a natural human emotion that can actually fuel positive change when channeled correctly. The problem isn't having anger, it's letting anger have you. Jack Ma once said that in his early days, he faced rejection after rejection, criticism after criticism, but he learned that reacting in anger would only close doors, not open them. By the end of this video, you'll have a complete toolkit to not just manage your anger, but to transform it into a superpower that propels you forward rather than holding you back. So grab a notebook, get comfortable, and let's dive into these 7 game-changing techniques. Technique 1. Don't make sudden decisions. Let me start with a story that changed everything for Jack Ma. Back in 1999, when Alibaba was just a startup operating from a tiny apartment, Jack Ma had a heated argument with one of his co-founders. The disagreement was so intense that in that moment of rage, Jack Ma was ready to kick his partner out of the company immediately. He was furious, felt betrayed, and wanted instant resolution. But something stopped him. Instead of making that decision in the heat of the moment, he told his partner, "Let's revisit this tomorrow." That one decision to pause, to not act on impulse, saved not just a friendship, but potentially the entire future of Alibaba. That co-founder went on to become one of the most crucial members of the team. This is the first and perhaps most critical technique. Never make important decisions when you're angry. When we're in a state of anger, our prefrontal cortex, the rational thinking part of our brain, literally goes offline. Scientists call this amygdala hijack. Your emotional brain takes control, and suddenly you're operating on pure instinct rather than logic. Think about the last time you made a decision while angry. How did that turn out? I'm willing to bet it wasn't your finest moment. Maybe you sent an email you regretted, ended a relationship prematurely, or quit a job in a fit of rage. We've all been there. Here's what you need to understand. Anger creates a temporary form of insanity. I don't mean that to be dramatic. It's literally what happens in your brain. The rational you, the wise you, the strategic you, that person disappears when anger takes the wheel. Jack Ma understood this intuitively. Throughout his career, he made it a rule never to fire anyone, never to end partnerships, never to make strategic business decisions when he was emotional. he would always implement what I call the 24-hour rule. Any major decision made in anger had to wait at least 24 hours. But you don't always have 24 hours, right? Sometimes you need to respond immediately. Here's what you can do. Create what I call decision categories. For small, reversible decisions, you might only need a 10-minute pause. For medium-impact decisions, give yourself an hour. For life-changing decisions, relationships, career moves, major purchases, nothing less than 24 hours. Let me give you a practical framework. When you feel that surge of anger and the urge to make a decision, ask yourself these 3 questions. First, is this decision reversible? Second, who else will this decision affect? Third, will I feel the same way about this in a week? If the decision is irreversible, affects other people significantly, or you're unsure about how you'll feel later, that's your brain telling you to pump the brakes. I remember reading about a CEO who had a special email folder called Angry Drafts. Whenever he was furious and wanted to send a scathing email, he would write it out completely, getting all his emotions onto the page. But instead of hitting send, he'd save it to this folder. The next day, he'd read it again. He told me that in over 10 years of using this system, he never once sent any of those angry emails. Not one. And he credited this simple practice with saving his career multiple times. The key insight here is that anger makes everything feel urgent when it's usually not. That feeling of, I need to do something right now, is almost always a lie. Your emotional brain is telling you, the real urgency is to not act, not to decide, not to respond until you've regained your rational mind. Technique 2. Try to understand the reason behind your anger. Jack Ma once shared a profound insight during a business conference. He said, "Every time someone makes me angry, I thank them because they're showing me something about myself that I need to see." This wasn't just philosophical wisdom. It was a practical approach that helped him build one of the world's largest companies. Most people experience anger and immediately focus on the external trigger. What someone did, what someone said, how unfair the situation is. But Jack Ma trained himself to do something completely different. He would ask, what is this anger trying to tell me about myself? This is revolutionary because anger is rarely about what you think it's about. On the surface, you might be angry because your colleague took credit for your work. But dig deeper, and you might discover that you're really angry because you don't feel valued, or because you're afraid of being overlooked, or because you have unhealed wounds around recognition from your childhood. Understanding your anger is like being a detective in your own emotional life. And here's the fascinating part. When you understand the real reason behind your anger, it often dissolves naturally. It's like turning on a light in a dark room. The monsters you were afraid of suddenly become just furniture and shadows. Let me walk you through Jack Ma's approach to anger analysis. He developed what I call the 5 why method for emotions. When you feel angry, instead of reacting, you ask yourself, why 5 times in a row? For example, I'm angry because my boss criticized my presentation. Why does that make me angry? Because I worked really hard on it. Why does their criticism anger me when I worked hard? Because I don't feel appreciated. Why is feeling unappreciated so triggering for me? Because I need validation to feel secure. Why do I need external validation to feel secure? Because I don't fully believe in my own worth yet. See how we went from my boss is unfair to I have some self-worth issues to work on? The first insight leads to conflict and resentment. The second insight leads to personal growth and emotional freedom. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Jack Ma discovered that his anger often revealed his values. When something made him furious, it was usually because one of his core values was being violated. Anger became his internal compass, pointing him toward what mattered most to him. For instance, early in Alibaba's journey, Jack Ma would get particularly angry when he saw small businesses being taken advantage of by larger corporations. That anger wasn't just random irritation. It was his values speaking. It revealed his deep commitment to leveling the playing field for small entrepreneurs. That anger-revealed value became the driving force behind Alibaba's entire business model. So here's a powerful exercise. Keep an anger journal for 1 week. Every time you get angry, write down 3 things. What triggered the anger, what you think it's really about, and what value of yours might have been challenged. You'll start to see patterns that will blow your mind. Maybe you consistently get angry when people are late because you value respect. Maybe you get furious when plans change because you value security and predictability. Maybe criticism triggers rage because you value excellence and perfection. Once you see these patterns, you can start addressing the root causes instead of just managing the symptoms. Jack Ma said that understanding his anger patterns helped him hire better people, make better business decisions, and even choose better friends. There's another layer to this that most people miss. Sometimes your anger isn't even about the present situation. It's about something from your past that never got resolved. Psychologists call this emotional residue. You might get disproportionately angry about a small slight because it reminds your subconscious of a big hurt from years ago. Jack Ma talks about how his anger around being underestimated wasn't really about current situations. It was about all the times in his youth when teachers, employers, and even family members told him he wasn't smart enough, good-looking enough, or capable enough to succeed. Understanding this helped him separate past pain from present reality. The goal isn't to eliminate anger, it's to become curious about it. When you shift from being a victim of your anger to being a student of your anger, everything changes. You transform from being someone who gets angry to someone who gets information. Technique 3. Take deep breaths. Now, you might be thinking, really? Deep breathing? That's the best you've got? But hang on, because what I'm about to share about breathing and anger will completely change how you see this simple technique. Jack Ma didn't just stumble upon breathing techniques, he studied them intensively. During the most stressful period of Alibaba's growth, when the company was facing potential bankruptcy, and Jack was dealing with angry investors, government pressure, and team conflicts daily, he discovered something that would become his secret weapon. He learned that anger creates a specific physiological state in your body. Your heart rate spikes, your blood pressure rises, stress hormones flood your system, and most crucially, your breathing becomes shallow and rapid. This isn't just a side effect of anger. It's actually fuel for the fire. Shallow breathing keeps you in fight or flight mode, making it nearly impossible to think clearly or respond wisely. But here's the game changer. Your breath is the one aspect of your nervous system that's both automatic and voluntary. You can't directly control your heart rate or blood pressure in the moment, but you can control your breathing, and when you do, everything else follows. Jack Ma didn't just do random deep breathing. He developed what I call the 478 reset technique. When he felt anger rising, he would immediately breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 7 counts, and exhale for 8 counts. He'd repeat this cycle 4 times. This specific pattern triggers what's called the parasympathetic nervous system, your body's natural calm-down response. But there's something even more powerful happening here that most people don't realize. When you consciously control your breathing during anger, you're literally rewiring your brain. Neuroscientists have discovered that deliberate breathing practices strengthen the connection between your prefrontal cortex and your emotional centers. In other words, you're building stronger pathways for rational thinking to override emotional reactions. Let me share the science behind this, because it's absolutely fascinating. When you're angry, your sympathetic nervous system activates, releasing cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones are designed for physical threats. They prepare your body to fight or run. But most modern anger isn't about physical threats, so these chemicals just create mental fog and poor decision-making. Deep, controlled breathing activates the vagus nerve, which is like a reset button for your entire nervous system. It signals your brain that you're safe, which allows those stress hormones to clear out and rational thinking to return. Jack Ma called this creating space between stimulus and response. Here's the specific technique Jack Ma refined over years of practice. And it's more sophisticated than simple deep breathing. First, when you notice anger rising, place one hand on your chest and one on your stomach. You want to breathe so that only the bottom hand moves. This ensures you're breathing deeply into your diaphragm, rather than just expanding your chest. Second, make your exhale longer than your inhale. This is crucial because the exhale activates your parasympathetic nervous system more than the inhale. Jack Ma's 478 pattern works perfectly for this. Third, and this is where it gets really interesting, Jack Ma would pair his breathing with a specific mental phrase. As he breathed in, he'd think, "I am in control of my response." As he held his breath, he'd think, "I choose wisdom over reaction." As he exhaled, he'd think, "I release this anger and choose peace." But here's what's really brilliant about Jack Ma's approach. He didn't wait until he was angry to practice this technique. He spent 10 minutes every morning doing this breathing pattern, so that when anger arose, the technique was already programmed into his nervous system. It became an automatic response rather than something he had to remember to do. There's also a social dimension to this that Jack Ma discovered. When you're in a conflict with someone and you start doing deliberate breathing, it doesn't just calm you down. It often calms down the other person too. Mirror neurons in their brain pick up on your regulated state, and they unconsciously begin to regulate as well. I've seen this work in boardrooms, in marriages, in family conflicts. One person taking control of their breathing can literally change the entire energy of a room. Jack Ma used this technique during some of Alibaba's most challenging negotiations, and he credited it with helping him stay clear-headed when millions of dollars were at stake. Here's a practical challenge for you. For the next week, set 3 random alarms on your phone. When the alarm goes off, wherever you are, do 4 rounds of the 478 breathing pattern. You're not trying to calm down from anger. You're training your nervous system to respond to your breath commands. Then, when real anger arises, you'll have a trained response ready to deploy. Jack Ma often said that breath control was the foundation of emotional control, and emotional control was the foundation of business success. In a world where everyone is reactive, the person who can stay calm and think clearly has an enormous advantage. Technique 4. Drink water, take a walk. This might sound almost too simple, but Jack Ma discovered something that most people completely overlook. Anger has a physical component that requires physical solutions. When he was building Alibaba and facing constant stress and conflict, he noticed that his worst decisions and most regrettable reactions always happened when he was dehydrated and had been sitting in meetings for hours. Here's what's happening in your body that most people don't realize. When you're angry, your body goes into fight or flight mode, which diverts blood flow away from your prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain, and toward your muscles and survival systems. This is why you literally can't think straight when you're furious. But here's the kicker. Dehydration makes this effect dramatically worse. Even mild dehydration, and I'm talking about just losing 1 to 2% of your body water, impairs cognitive function, increases irritability, and makes it much harder to regulate emotions. Jack Ma realized that many of his anger episodes weren't just emotional, they were physiological. His brain simply didn't have the resources it needed to function optimally. So he developed what he called the reset ritual. The moment he felt anger rising, before any conversation, before any decision, he would drink a full glass of water and take a 5-minute walk. Not because he was thirsty or needed exercise, but because he was literally giving his brain the resources it needed to function properly. The water part is crucial, but not for the reasons you might think. Yes, hydration helps brain function, but there's something even more important happening. The act of drinking water forces you to slow down, to pause, to do something nurturing for yourself. It's a physical signal to your nervous system that you're taking care of yourself rather than going into attack mode. Jack Ma told a story about a heated board meeting where tensions were incredibly high. Investors were angry, the team was stressed, and everyone was talking over each other. Instead of jumping into the fray, Jack Ma stood up, poured himself a glass of water, drank it slowly, and said, "I'll be back in 5 minutes." He took a walk around the building. When he came back, not only was he calm and clear-headed, but the entire room had settled down. His action gave everyone else permission to take a breath. But the walking component is where the real magic happens. When you're angry and you move your body, several incredible things occur simultaneously. First, walking activates your parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest mode, which counters the fight-or-flight response of anger. Second, and this is fascinating, walking stimulates the production of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. This is like fertilizer for your brain cells, particularly in the prefrontal cortex, where rational thinking happens. You're literally growing your capacity for wise decision-making with every step. Third, walking changes your perspective. Literally. When you're sitting in the same space where the anger arose, you're more likely to stay stuck in the same emotional state. But when you move your body through space, you also move your mind into new possibilities. Jack Ma had a specific walking practice for anger management. He wouldn't just wander aimlessly. He had a structured approach. For the first 2 minutes of his walk, he would allow himself to fully feel the anger. No suppressing, no positive thinking, just complete acknowledgement of the emotion. He called this honoring the messenger. For the next 2 minutes, he would shift his focus to his physical sensations. His feet on the ground, the air on his skin, the rhythm of his movement. This grounded him in the present moment rather than staying lost in the story of his anger. For the final minute, he would ask himself one specific question. What's the wisest response here? Not, how can I win? Or, how can I prove I'm right? But, what's the wisest response? The combination of water and walking isn't just about calming down. It's about upgrading your entire state. You're shifting from dehydrated and sedentary to hydrated and moving. From tunnel vision to broader perspective. From reactive to responsive. But here's something most people miss. The timing of this technique matters enormously. Jack Ma learned that there's a window of opportunity in every anger episode. If you catch it in the first 30 seconds to 2 minutes, water and walking can completely shift your state. But if you wait too long, if you let the anger build and compound, it becomes much harder to interrupt. This is why Jack Ma developed such acute anger awareness. He learned to recognize the very first physical signs. The tension in his shoulders, the heat in his chest, the change in his breathing. The moment he noticed these signals, before the anger thoughts fully formed, he would implement his reset ritual. Here's a practical tip. Identify your personal anger early warning system. For some people, it's tension in the jaw. For others, it's heat in the face or tightness in the stomach. Learn your signs and use them as triggers for immediate action. Jack Ma also discovered that this technique worked even better when he made it a regular practice, not just something he did when angry. Every day, usually in the afternoon when stress tends to peak, he would drink a large glass of water and take a 5-minute walk, regardless of his emotional state. This kept his baseline stress lower and made him less likely to reach the anger threshold in the first place. Technique 5. Stay quiet and count to 10. Here's where Jack Ma's approach differed dramatically from conventional wisdom. Most people think counting to 10 is about buying time until the anger passes. But Jack Ma discovered that those 10 seconds could be used strategically to completely transform your internal state and the entire trajectory of a conflict. Let me tell you about the moment this technique saved Jack Ma's career. During a crucial negotiation with Yahoo, tensions were incredibly high. Jerry Yang had just made what Jack Ma considered an insulting offer, and every fiber of his being wanted to respond immediately with anger and indignation. In that moment, he felt his reputation, his company's future, and his personal pride all under attack. But instead of speaking, Jack Ma went completely silent and began counting. Not just 1, 2, 3, but what he called strategic counting. With each number, he was doing something specific and intentional. 1. He acknowledged the anger without judgment. I am angry, and that's understandable. 2. He reminded himself of his larger goal. I want a successful partnership, not to be right. 3. He considered Jerry's perspective. He's protecting Yahoo's interests, just as I'm protecting Alibaba's. 4. He asked himself what his hero would do. How would the wisest negotiator I know handle this? 5. He remembered that this feeling would pass. This anger is temporary, but my response will have permanent consequences. 6. He connected with his breath and his body. My feet are on the ground. I am safe. 7. He thought about his team and his responsibility to them. This isn't just about me. 8. He considered multiple possible responses and their likely outcomes. 9. He chose his intention for what would happen next. I will respond with strength and wisdom. 10. He spoke from this transformed state. The result? Instead of an angry reaction that would have ended the negotiation, Jack Ma responded with a counter-proposal that ultimately led to one of the most beneficial partnerships in internet history. But here's what most people get wrong about counting to 10. They think it's about suppressing anger or waiting for it to go away. Jack Ma's approach was completely different. He was using those 10 seconds to actively transform his internal state and choose his response consciously. The silence component is absolutely crucial, and it's more powerful than most people realize. When you're in conflict with someone and you suddenly go quiet, several psychological dynamics immediately shift. First, the other person stops talking because humans have a natural tendency to fill silence. This gives their anger momentum a chance to slow down too. Second, your silence often makes the other person become curious about what you're thinking, rather than continuing to be defensive. It shifts them from reactive mode to wondering mode. Third, silence gives you social power in the interaction. The person who can stay calm and quiet while others are emotional is often perceived as more in control and more credible. But Jack Ma took this even further. He learned to use his body language during these 10 seconds to communicate strength rather than weakness. Instead of looking down or away, which might be interpreted as submission or discomfort, he would maintain gentle eye contact. Instead of tense, defensive posture, he would consciously relax his shoulders and keep his hands open and visible. This sent a subtle but powerful message. I'm not afraid of this conflict. I'm not overwhelmed by your anger, and I'm choosing to respond, thoughtfully rather than reactively. There's also a neurological component to this that's fascinating. When you count, you're activating your prefrontal cortex, the rational thinking part of your brain. This literally strengthens the connection between your thinking brain and your emotional brain. You're building neural pathways that make wise responses more automatic over time. Jack Ma developed variations of this technique for different situations. For minor irritations, he would count to 5 with simple awareness. For moderate anger, the full 10 count with strategic questions. For intense fury, he would count to 20 while also controlling his breathing. But here's the advanced technique that Jack Ma mastered. He learned to count in a way that the other person couldn't even tell he was doing it. Instead of obvious pausing, he would slow down his speech pattern slightly, giving himself micro-pauses between words or sentences to do his internal counting and reframing. The key insight Jack Ma discovered is that the goal of counting isn't to eliminate anger. It's to create space between the trigger and your response. In that space lies your power to choose. Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, said it perfectly. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Jack Ma made this space his home base. He got so good at creating this pause that even in the most intense business conflicts, he could maintain his center and respond from wisdom rather than emotion. Here's a practical exercise to build this skill. Starting today, in every conversation you have, try to pause for just 1 second before responding to anything anyone says. Not because you're angry, but just to practice creating that space. you'll be amazed at how much more thoughtful and effective your communication becomes. Technique 6. Don't hurt anyone because of anger. This final technique isn't just about being a good person, though it certainly is that. Jack Ma discovered that how you treat others when you're angry reveals and shapes who you are at your core, and it has profound implications for your success in every area of life. Let me share a story that illustrates the power of this principle. During one of Alibaba's most challenging periods, a key employee made a costly mistake that lost the company hundreds of thousands of dollars. The entire leadership team was furious, and there was unanimous agreement that this person needed to be fired immediately and publicly as an example to others. Jack Ma was angry too, perhaps more angry than anyone because the mistake had happened in an area he had specifically warned about. Every instinct told him to unleash his fury, to make this person pay for their error, to show strength through punishment. But Jack Ma had made himself a promise years earlier. He would never use his anger as a weapon against another human being. So instead of firing the employee publicly, he called them into a private meeting. Instead of yelling, he spoke quietly. Instead of attacking their character, he focused on the specific mistake and what could be learned from it. The result was extraordinary. That employee became one of Alibaba's most dedicated and careful workers, eventually leading a division that generated millions in revenue. More importantly, word spread throughout the company about how Jack Ma handled conflict, and it created a culture where people weren't afraid to take calculated risks or admit mistakes. But here's the deeper principle. When you hurt others in anger, you're not just damaging them. You're damaging yourself in ways you might not even realize. Every time you use anger to wound someone, you're training your brain that anger is a tool for control and domination. You're making yourself more likely to default to anger in future conflicts. Jack Ma understood that anger, when used to hurt others, becomes addictive. There's a temporary feeling of power and release when you unleash fury on someone, especially if they can't fight back. But that temporary satisfaction comes at an enormous cost. It erodes your relationships, damages your reputation, and most importantly, it makes you a smaller person. On the flip side, when you maintain your dignity and treat others with respect even when you're angry, something remarkable happens. You build what psychologists call emotional muscle. You prove to yourself that you can feel intense emotion without being controlled by it. You develop genuine strength rather than the fake strength of aggression. This principle extends far beyond obvious situations like yelling at employees or attacking family members. Jack Ma learned to recognize subtle ways that anger could be used as a weapon. Sarcasm, passive-aggressive comments, withholding cooperation, giving someone the silent treatment, or even just the energy you bring into a room when you're upset. He developed what he called the dignity rule. No matter how angry he was, he would never do anything that would cause him to lose respect for himself later. He would ask himself, will I be proud of how I handled this situation when I look back on it in a year? But Jack Ma's approach went even deeper. He realized that not hurting others when angry isn't just about restraint. It's about transformation. When you feel intense anger towards someone and choose to respond with respect and dignity, you alchemize that emotional energy into something more powerful. Instead of using his anger to attack, Jack Ma learned to use it as fuel for creative problem solving. When someone's behavior made him furious instead of lashing out, he would channel that energy into figuring out systems and structures that would prevent similar problems in the future. His anger became a force for improvement rather than destruction. There's a profound psychological principle at work here. When you consistently choose not to hurt others despite feeling angry, you develop what researchers call emotional regulation mastery. Your brain literally rewires itself to have stronger connections between the rational and emotional centers. You become someone who feels deeply but acts wisely. Jack Ma also discovered that this principle creates a positive feedback loop in your relationships. When people see that you can be trusted not to attack them even when you're upset, they're more likely to be honest with you, more likely to bring you problems early when they're easier to solve, and more likely to respect your leadership. But perhaps most importantly, not hurting others when you're angry allows you to maintain access to your own wisdom and creativity. When you're in attack mode, your brain goes into tunnel vision. You can only see threats and weapons. But when you stay connected to your dignity and compassion, even while angry, you maintain access to your full intelligence. Here's the practical application. Develop your own version of Jack Ma's dignity rule. Before you speak or act when angry, ask yourself, is what I'm about to do going to move this situation toward resolution? Or is it just going to make me feel better in the moment? If it's the latter, pause and choose a different response. Jack Ma often said that your character isn't revealed when things are going well. It's revealed when you're angry, frustrated, or under pressure. In those moments, you get to choose who you want to be. You can be someone who uses emotion as an excuse for poor behavior, or you can be someone who feels deeply but acts with wisdom and integrity. Bringing it all together. These 7 techniques aren't just anger management tools. They're a complete system for emotional mastery that can transform every area of your life. Jack Ma didn't just use these techniques to build a business empire. He used them to become the kind of person who could handle the pressure, complexity, and responsibility that comes with extraordinary success. Let's talk about how to implement these techniques as an integrated system, rather than just random tips you try to remember when you're upset. Jack Ma discovered that the real power came from practicing these techniques daily, not just when anger arose. Every morning, Jack Ma would spend 5 minutes doing the breathing technique we discussed, not because he was angry, but to train his nervous system. He would drink a large glass of water and take a short walk, not because he was upset, but to maintain optimal brain function. He would practice the 10-second pause in low-stakes conversations to build the neural pathway for high-stakes moments. This is crucial because anger happens fast, and in those moments, you don't have time to remember techniques or make conscious choices unless you've already trained your automatic responses. Champions don't perform differently under pressure because they're naturally better. They perform consistently because they've trained their automatic responses to be excellent. Jack Ma also developed what he called anger accountability. He would review his day every evening and honestly assess how he handled any moments of anger or frustration. Not to judge himself, but to learn and improve. He would ask, what triggered me today? How did I respond? What worked well? What could I do better next time? This kind of honest self-reflection is what separates people who occasionally manage their anger well from people who consistently transform anger into wisdom and positive action. But here's something that goes beyond just managing your own anger. Jack Ma discovered that mastering these techniques made him incredibly skilled at helping others manage their anger too. When you're calm and centered in the presence of someone else's fury, you become like a tuning fork that helps them find their own calm frequency. This skill became one of Jack Ma's greatest assets as a leader. In board meetings, negotiations, and team conflicts, he was often the person who could stay calm and help others find their way back to rationality. This made him incredibly valuable and respected, because everyone knew they could count on him to be steady when things got chaotic. The ultimate goal isn't to never feel angry. Anger is a normal and sometimes useful human emotion. The goal is to become someone who can feel anger fully while still choosing wise responses. You want to be someone who has access to the energy and information that anger provides without being controlled or diminished by it. Jack Ma often said that emotional mastery was the foundation of all other forms of mastery. If you can't manage your inner world, you'll never be able to effectively manage your outer world. But when you develop these skills, when you become someone who can stay centered and wise even under pressure, you gain access to opportunities and relationships that simply aren't available to people who are controlled by their emotions. As we wrap up this deep dive into Jack Ma's 7 techniques for transforming anger, I want you to understand that what we've covered today isn't just about becoming calmer or more pleasant to be around. These techniques are about becoming more powerful, more effective, and more successful in every area of your life. Think about the most successful people you know, the people you most respect and admire. I guarantee that one of their common traits is emotional self-mastery. They might feel emotions just as intensely as everyone else, but they don't let emotions make their decisions for them. Jack Ma built Alibaba into one of the world's largest companies, not despite his emotions, but because he learned to work with them skillfully. Every technique we've discussed today played a role in his success. The pause before major decisions, the curiosity about his own emotional patterns, the breathing practices that kept him clear-headed in crucial negotiations, the physical reset rituals that maintained his peak performance, the strategic silence that gave him social power, and the dignity that earned him respect and loyalty. But here's what I want you to remember most. These aren't techniques you master once and then you're done. They're practices that you develop over time. And like any skill, they get stronger with consistent use. So here's your action plan. Don't try to implement all 7 techniques at once. That's a recipe for overwhelm and failure. Instead, choose the one technique that resonated most strongly with you today. Maybe it was the breathing practice. Maybe it was the decision pause. Maybe it was the walking ritual. Commit to practicing that one technique every day for the next 2 weeks. Not just when you're angry, but as a daily practice. After 2 weeks, add a second technique. After another 2 weeks, add a third. By the end of 3 months, you'll have all 7 techniques integrated into your automatic responses, and you'll be amazed at the transformation in your relationships, your decision-making, and your overall effectiveness. But I want to hear about your journey. In the comments below, tell me which technique you're going to start with and why. Share a story about a time when you wish you had handled anger differently. Let's create a community of people committed to emotional mastery and mutual support. If this video has been valuable to you, If you can see how these techniques could change your life, please hit that like button to help this content reach more people who need it. Subscribe to the channel if you want more content about personal development, emotional intelligence, and success principles from the world's most successful people. And here's something special. I've created a free PDF guide that summarizes all 7 techniques with practical exercises and daily practices. The link is in the description below. Download it, print it out, and use it as your daily reference guide as you build these new habits. Remember, every master was once a beginner, and every pro was once an amateur. Jack Ma wasn't born with perfect emotional control. He developed it through consistent practice and commitment to growth. You can develop these same skills, and when you do, you'll have tools that will serve you for the rest of your life. Your future self, the person you'll be 6 months or a year from now after consistently practicing these techniques, is counting on the decisions you make today. That future version of you is hoping that today is the day you decided to take control of your emotional responses and start building the life you truly want. The path to emotional mastery isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. Every moment of anger you transform into wisdom. Every conflict you handle with dignity. Every decision you make from a place of calm clarity rather than emotional reaction. These moments compound over time to create an extraordinary life. Jack Ma went from being a rejected English teacher to building one of the world's most valuable companies. The techniques we've covered today weren't just helpful along the way. They were essential. Without emotional mastery, he never would have survived the countless rejections, setbacks, and challenges that are inevitable on the path to any meaningful success. But you don't have to be building a billion-dollar company for these techniques to transform your life. Whether you're trying to improve your relationships, advance in your career, be a better parent, or just feel more peace and control in your daily life, these 7 techniques will serve you. The question isn't whether these techniques work. Jack Ma's story and countless others prove they do. The question is whether you're willing to do the work to make them work in your life. Are you ready to become the kind of person who feels deeply but acts wisely? Are you ready to transform your anger from a liability into an asset? If your answer is yes, then start today. Start right now. Take a deep breath using the 4-7-8 technique we discussed. Drink a glass of water mindfully. Make a commitment to pause before your next decision, no matter how small. Your journey to emotional mastery begins with a single conscious breath, a single mindful pause, a single moment where you choose wisdom over reaction. And that moment can be right now. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being committed to your growth, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll explore more strategies for building an extraordinary life. Until then, remember, every emotion is information, every challenge is an opportunity, and every moment is a chance to choose who you want to become. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon.